What if the most powerful empire on Earth lost control of 13 colonies not because of one battle, but because of a chain reaction of decisions, each rational on its own, yet explosive when combined? The story of the American Revolution does not begin in 1775 with musket fire at Lexington. It begins in 1763, at the end of a global war. When the Treaty of Paris concluded the 7 Years' War, known in America as the French and Indian War, Great Britain emerged triumphant over France. The British Empire now controlled vast territories in North America, from Canada to the Mississippi River. But victory carried a staggering cost. Britain's national debt had nearly doubled, soaring to over £130 million, an unprecedented financial burden in the 18th century. British policymakers, including Prime Minister George Grenville, faced a practical question: who should pay for defending this expanded empire? Stationing 10,000 troops in North America seemed essential to guard against Native American resistance and foreign threats. Grenville reasoned that the American colonists, who had benefited from British military protection, should contribute to imperial expenses. What seemed logical in London felt unconstitutional in Boston. The first major shift came with the Proclamation of 1763, issued by George III. It forbade colonial settlement west of the Appalachian Mountains, attempting to stabilize relations with native nations after Pontiac's rebellion. Colonists, many of whom had fought for access to Western lands, were outraged. They saw the policy as a betrayal of wartime promises. In 1764, Parliament passed the Sugar Act, reducing the tax on molasses, but strictly enforcing customs duties to curb smuggling. Admiralty courts, without juries, tried accused smugglers. Colonial merchants argued that this violated their traditional rights as Englishmen. The issue was not the rate of taxation, but the principle of representation. Then came the Stamp Act of 1765. For the first time, Parliament imposed a direct internal tax on the colonies. Legal documents, newspapers, licenses, even playing cards required an official stamp. The reaction was swift and volatile. In Boston, crowds destroyed the home of Lieutenant Governor Thomas Hutchinson. Across the colonies, delegates convened the Stamp Act Congress in New York, asserting that only colonial assemblies could tax colonial residents. Organizations such as the Sons of Liberty, led by figures like Samuel Adams, mobilized public resistance. Merchants organized non-importation agreements, boycotting British goods. British manufacturers, feeling the economic pressure, lobbied Parliament. By 1766, the Stamp Act was repealed. Yet Parliament simultaneously passed the Declaratory Act, affirming its authority to legislate for the colonies in all cases whatsoever. The constitutional conflict remained unresolved. In 1767, Chancellor of the Exchequer Charles Townshend introduced new duties on glass, lead, paper, paint, and tea, the Townshend Acts. Revenue would pay colonial governors and judges directly, reducing their dependence on colonial legislatures. This struck at the heart of self-government. Resistance intensified. Women participated through Daughters of Liberty spinning bees, producing homespun cloth to replace British textiles. British troops arrived in Boston in 1768 to maintain order. Their red uniforms symbolized imperial authority. Tensions between soldiers and civilians escalated over the next 2 years. On March 5, 1770, confrontation turned deadly. British soldiers fired into a hostile crowd, killing 5 colonists. The incident, later known as the Boston Massacre, was immortalized in engravings by Paul Revere, depicting British brutality. Ironically, future President John Adams defended the soldiers in court, ensuring a fair trial, an example of colonial commitment to rule of law even amid crisis. Parliament repealed most Townshend duties but retained the tax on tea, asserting its right to tax. For a few years, tensions cooled, yet distrust simmered beneath the surface. The crisis reignited in 1773 with the Tea Act. Designed to rescue the struggling British East India Company, the act granted it a monopoly on tea sales in America. Though tea became cheaper, many colonists perceived the move as a Trojan horse, a strategy to legitimize parliamentary taxation. On December 16, 1773, members of the Sons of Liberty boarded ships in Boston Harbor and dumped 342 chests of tea into the water. The Boston Tea Party shocked the empire.
Britain's response was severe. In 1774, Parliament passed the Coercive Acts, which Americans labeled the Intolerable Acts. The port of Boston was closed until the tea was paid for. Massachusetts' charter was altered, limiting town meetings. The Administration of Justice Act allowed royal officials accused of crimes to be tried in Britain. To many colonists, this confirmed fears of tyranny. Rather than isolating Massachusetts, the punishment unified the colonies. In September 1774, delegates from 12 colonies met in Philadelphia at the First Continental Congress. They coordinated economic resistance and asserted colonial rights. The language of protest evolved from grievance to sovereignty. Meanwhile, British General Thomas Gage fortified Boston and prepared for potential rebellion. Colonial militias began stockpiling weapons. Committees of correspondence, pioneered by Samuel Adams and Thomas Jefferson, facilitated intercolonial communication, spreading revolutionary ideology with unprecedented speed. On April 19, 1775, British troops marched toward Concord to seize colonial munitions. At Lexington, they encountered armed militia. A shot rang out. The shot heard round the world. Open warfare had begun. Yet even then, many colonists hoped for reconciliation. The Second Continental Congress sent the Olive Branch Petition to King George III, affirming loyalty while seeking redress. The king rejected it, declaring the colonies in rebellion. By early 1776, sentiment shifted dramatically. Thomas Paine published Common Sense, arguing that monarchy itself was incompatible with liberty. His pamphlet sold over 100,000 copies in a population of only 2.5 million, an astonishing circulation rate. The timeline from 1763 to 1776 reveals something extraordinary. The American Revolution was not inevitable. Each stage represented a decision point. Britain sought revenue and control. Colonists sought rights and autonomy. Policies meant to assert authority instead fostered unity. Attempts to discipline Massachusetts forged continental solidarity. Economic regulation ignited ideological transformation. By July 4, 1776, the Second Continental Congress adopted the Declaration of Independence, largely drafted by Thomas Jefferson. It was not merely a list of complaints, but a philosophical manifesto asserting that governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed. The causes of the American Revolution were cumulative and systemic: war debt, imperial reorganization, taxation without representation, enforcement through standing armies, punitive legislation, and ideological awakening. What astonishes historians is how rapidly political identity transformed. Within 13 years, loyal British subjects became revolutionaries willing to risk treason. The revolution's origins lie not in a single dramatic moment, but in a cascade of interconnected events. Each act of Parliament, each protest in Boston streets, each pamphlet printed in Philadelphia contributed to a widening gulf across the Atlantic. It was a conflict not only over taxes, but over the nature of sovereignty itself. In retrospect, the empire's loss of its American colonies appears shocking. Britain possessed the world's most powerful navy and a professional army. The colonies were divided by region, economy, and religion. Yet the chain reaction triggered in 1763 reshaped global history. The revolution inspired movements in France, Latin America, and beyond. It introduced a radical experiment in republican government. The causes of the American Revolution form a timeline of escalating miscalculations and mounting resolve, a testament to how policy, principle, and public opinion can converge to overturn even the mightiest empire.
If you enjoyed this deep dive into George Washington's rise to power, make sure to subscribe for more powerful, fact-driven stories from American history. Hit the like button, share this with fellow history fans, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next chapter in the story of the United States. See you in the next episode.